Hello and welcome to The World Today on Channels Television. I'm Cynthia. We'll begin with breaking news. An Algerian jihadist group has released a video online purportedly showing a French tourist being beheaded. The 55-year-old had been abducted by the group, which gave the French government 24 hours to stop airstrikes in Iraq, failing which he would be killed. This was after the group released a video in which Gordel could be seen flanked by two masked men and apparently speaking under duress, asking the French president not to intervene in Iraq. We'll give you details on that story as we go on, but now we move on. U.S. warplanes have carried out new airstrikes on the Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria, hitting vehicles and arms dumps. 8 IS vehicles were damaged near Abu Kamal on the Syria-Iraq border, and 2 others in Deir al-Zur in the east of Syria. In Iraq, there were strikes on the IS targets west of Baghdad and southeast of Erbil near Kurdish territory.
Video posted online purports to show the Islamic State militant group intensifying its battle against Kurdish forces for control of a Syrian town at the border with Turkey. The footage said to be filmed in the town of Kobani on Monday and Tuesday, September the 22 and 23rd, shows both sides firing at each other using machine guns and heavy artillery. Later Islamic State fighters are shown throwing the Kurdish fighters' flag from the top of a high tower and waving their own flag as a replacement. Other video was said to show villagers celebrating Kurdish fighters retaking control of a village. The United States military on Wednesday, September 24th, confirmed it had launched 5 more airstrikes targeting Islamic State in Syria and Iraq in the latest round of attacks on the militant group. 1 strike hit Syria northwest of Al-Qaim along the border. 2 strikes hit were west of Baghdad and 2 southeast of Erbil in Iraq. The latest strikes destroyed 2 Islamic State armed vehicles, 8 other vehicles, a weapons cache and fighting positions. Meanwhile, the brother-in-law of a volunteer British worker being held by the Islamic State militants on Tuesday spoke about his fears regarding the implications of airstrikes being carried out against the militant group. Hennon's brother-in-law, Colin Livesey, fears that the airstrikes may make it harder to locate the British hostage.
It scares me. It does scare me, because if they're going to do airstrikes on them, they'll just run away and they'll take him with him and no one will know where he is again. They might have a fair idea where he might be now, but by the time they get to where he was, they might have moved him to somewhere else.
Various attacks, bomber and fighter aircraft were used in the airstrikes and all aircraft were able to leave the area safely. While the United States has launched nearly 200 strikes in Iraq in recent weeks, this week's campaign opens a new front in Syria and thrusts Washington into the country's 3-year-old civil war. The first strikes in Syria were carried out with help of 5 Arab nations. So far, 20 airstrikes have been launched across Syria, targeting Islamic State.
Well, the U.S. President Barack Obama has laid out a broad vision of American leadership in a changing world in each. He told the UN General Assembly the world had not confronted the intolerance, sectarianism, and hopelessness that feeds extremism. The president also said the Ebola outbreak, Islamist militancy, and Russian aggression needed urgent addressing. Mr. Obama told the 193 nations represented that they came together at a crossroads between war and peace, between disorder and integration, and between fear and hope. Well, a senior French minister has criticized Turkey after plans to arrest suspected jihadis returning from Syria collapsed when they were put on the wrong flight. As security agents waited at a Paris airport, the 3 suspects were flown to Marseille in southern France, where they left the airport unchallenged. French Defense Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian says there's been a mix-up. The 3 suspects have now handed themselves into the police in southern France. Two of them are linked to Islamist mass killer Mohammed Merah, who died in police siege back in 2012. The three men are believed to belong to a jihadist recruiting network and are considered dangerous by the French security services. Now it appears as though the sanctions imposed on Russia have paid off now that NATO has announced it's observed a significant withdrawal of Russian troops from eastern Ukraine, but also adds that some forces still remain there. Moscow denies arming the rebels and sending Russian troops to Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and UN officials say over 3,200 people have been killed since the fighting began back in April. A shaky ceasefire is held since September the 5th, and the two sides have since agreed to set up a 30-kilometer buffer zone, but there were reports of overnight shelling in Donetsk and Ilbatsiv. Now, 8 months after her murder, the long arm of the law seems to have caught up with the murderers. A court in Venezuela has sentenced 3 men to lengthy jail sentences for the killing of Venezuelan beauty queen Monica Spare back in January. The 3 had pleaded guilty, and the 29-year-old, as well as her British partner Thomas Berry, were shot dead in January in front of their 5-year-old daughter during a roadside robbery. UN figures suggest that Venezuela has the second highest peacetime murder rate in the world, but the brutality of the crime did shock the country. We'll take a break now in the world today. When we come back, we'll bring you an update on the Ebola virus. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching The World Today on Channels Television. It's time to shift our attention to Africa. And of course, we start here in Nigeria. The National Human Rights Commission absolved the military of human rights abuses in the fight against insurgency in the northern part of the country today. The commission says the investigation of the evidence provided by Amnesty International to back their indictment of the security operatives last week has not been indicting in any way. The executive secretary of the commission, Professor Bim Angwe, exonerated the military of human abuses while receiving the representative of the Office of the High Commission for Human Rights in West Africa, Mr. Andrea Ori, who is on an official visit to Nigeria. Professor Angwe also called on the international community to do more than pay lip services to the fight against terrorism in the country.
The National Human Rights Commission of Nigeria has not discovered or found any deliberate act on behalf of the military authorities for extrajudicial killing of civilians in Nigeria. We believe that the international community do have a role to play here, because most of the ammunitions and devices being used by the insurgent groups are manufactured by companies, multinational companies in the international community. We believe that a good starting point will be a clear regulation of the proliferation of light weapons, small arms, and such devices that are being used by members of the insurgent groups. While Nigerians on a daily basis cry from the activities of the insurgent groups, multinational companies go to the banks smiling with profits made from the arms exported to Nigeria.
We are there to support you, to work with you. We know that the challenges are very high, but we really sympathize and empathize with you, and we really encourage you to do an excellent job that you're already doing.
Well, to health matters now, there have been many calls to the international community to help containing the spread of the Ebola virus, and some of those calls have been made by the likes of Pope Francis, and they seem to have been answered.
On Tuesday, September the 23rd, German aid organizations joined international efforts to try to combat Ebola in the Liberian capital, Monrovia, where 1,000 people are said to have been killed. Part of that help is being given by German organizations International Search and Rescue and Action Media, which have brought supplies to help with the construction of a new Ebola isolation center.
And they are completely closed tents, like I said, with a capacity of 44 beds.
Help has also arrived for Sierra Leone, where a team of 165 medical professionals in Havana received special training before heading there. Here, just before the team made the trip, the Cuban delegation watched as doctors and biohazard experts dressed in protective suits delivered potentially life-saving safety training sessions. During the training session in the Cuban capital, George Perez, director of the Pedro Curie Tropical Medicine Institute, explained the importance of disinfection as a means of preventing the spread of the highly infectious disease.
This infection is transmitted through personal contact with the person, that is, through tears, sweat, blood, urine, fecal matter. So there is no bodily contact or bodily fluid that isn't infectious. Even when people talk, fluid is expelled, and thick droplets can land in some places, and these can also be infectious. Therefore, it is very important that everything that is used be disinfected with hypochlorites.
The virus is one which could be fought as long as they are equipped with the right kind of information. Hence, the United Nations Children Agency, UNICEF, has launched a new open-source app store for international development known as Rapid Pro. Speaking at the event, UNICEF Executive Director Anthony Lake added a new app called Mero was also being created to be used in Ebola control strategies.
We are developing now something called M-Hero, which I'm excited about, which is being developed for Rapid Pro, and we're going to use for when we get it in, for the Ebola response, and it will allow us then to check on how the health centers are doing and check daily on the health of the community health workers.
Rapid Pro has been developed in collaboration with Nairoka, a Rwandan software firm responsible for TextIt, an intuitive visual interface for